Code 7, Cracking the Code for an Epic Life by Brian R. Johnson. Chapter 5, Break a Leg. Mrs. Huff tacked up a poster in the hall outside the school auditorium. Eager students in the drama club gathered around. "It's official," Mrs. Huff said, facing everyone. "Our musical has been chosen. Tomorrow I'll hand out scripts so you can practice for auditions next week. Good luck." Samantha stood on her tippy toes to look at the poster, but Trista, one of the tallest girls in the club, was blocking her view. "We're going to do Little Shop of Horrors," Trista exclaimed to her friends. Yes, Samantha loved that story. It was so full of hope, so full of dreams. Samantha's best friend, Raina, seemed just as excited. "Wardrobe for that will be fun." Raina always did wardrobe. She wanted to be a fashion designer one day. "What about you, Samantha? Tell me you're trying out for a part." Samantha's enthusiasm quickly faded. She bit her lip. "Should I try out this time?" Trista spun around. Why would Sam try out for anything? She put an arm around Samantha. "We need her to be stagehand, like last year. Right, girls?" One of Trista's friends nodded. "Who's going to move the set around and fetch us water?" "Yeah," another friend added. "Plus, we'd like to keep the show accident-free, if you know what I mean," she smirked. Samantha's cheeks burned. No one would ever forget about what had happened the last time she started a musical. Ugh. "Besides," Trista added, "my dad says if I get the lead, he's going to fly in Mr. Mason, a big talent scout from New York, to see me perform. You wouldn't ruin that opportunity for me, would you, Sam?" Samantha swallowed. Trista's father was the mayor, and Trista could really make Samantha's life miserable if she didn't cooperate. The last student who dared to ruffle Trista's feathers had to move out of town. The pet dog was suddenly declared a noise disturbance, and the family wouldn't give him up. At least, that was the rumor. Samantha sighed. "Of course, I wouldn't ruin it for you." Trista smiled with satisfaction. "I thought you'd agree, and my girls will take the chorus parts, right?" Her voice got louder so everyone standing nearby could hear. "Right?" Everyone nodded. "Then it's settled," Trista said. "You and the others will be supporting staff. We'll handle the rest." Trista sauntered off with her friends. "The nerve," Raina said. "Playing politics to get her way? It's disgusting." "It doesn't matter," Samantha said. "I wouldn't have tried out anyway." "Why not?" Samantha stared at Raina. "Hello, who can forget that I, Samantha Shannon, canceled the entire school's performance of Annie because Annie, me, fell off the stage and screamed bloody murder over a fractured tibia. I single-handedly gave the phrase break a leg a whole new meaning." Raina frowned. "That was 2 years ago." "I know," Samantha said, "but I also like doing the stagehand stuff too, so it's fine." "Really?" "Sort of." Raina raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? Being a stagehand is not why you're in the drama club, and you know it." She turned to leave. "I'll see you tomorrow." After Raina left, Samantha walked home thinking about what Raina had said. Her friend was right. The whole reason she was in the drama club was because she loved theater and everything about it. But what she wanted most of all was to sing in a musical. She had dreamed of Broadway since she was big enough to hold a hairbrush for a microphone and throw a feather boa over her shoulder. Samantha stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and imagined herself as Audrey, the lead, singing Suddenly Seymour. The crowd would be dazzled, but the next image she saw was herself falling into the orchestra pit. Crash! As she shrieked in agony, trying to extract herself from the timpani drum, Trista would be looking down at her, hands on hips. Audrey should have been mine. Then hundreds of kids would flock to the scene and whip out their cell phones, snapping pics of Samantha's little mishap. Samantha's vision faded, and the neighborhood came into view again. Try out for Audrey? Forget it. The next week at auditions, only Raina dared to challenge Trista for the lead, but she didn't get the part. Raina couldn't sing a note if her Christian Lacroix vintage purse depended on it. Later that day, Raina and Samantha hung out on Samantha's bed in her room. "At least I tried," Raina said. "Someone has to take the she-monster down. I think Mrs. Huff is dying for anyone besides Trista to play the lead. You should have auditioned. You would have beaten her." Samantha shook her head. She wasn't ready to face Trista's wrath if she had gotten the part. "It's just not my time. But at least you get to be an understudy. That's a step." Raina grinned. "I bet Trista can't stand that. Why don't we get sick and cough on her a few days before the show? Then when she comes down with a horrible case of strep, I can take the lead and put Trista in her place." The idea was appealing, but it's just not worth it. She'll be a fine Audrey. Raina tossed a pillow at Samantha. "You're driving me nuts. Don't let Trista take away your dreams. You're scared of her." "No, I'm not." "Yes, you are." The truth was, Raina was sort of right. Samantha was worried about Trista, but what Raina didn't know was that she was more worried about messing up the whole show. She just couldn't bring herself to do that again, dream or no dream. Over the course of the next 2 months, the club focused on the production of their new musical. As the weeks went by, it irked Samantha more and more that Trista had the part. She was just so mediocre. She couldn't remember her lines, she would always get blocking messed up, and she danced like a gangly giraffe. Samantha felt sorry for Mrs. Huff. Her teacher always looked like she would rather wallpaper her bathroom than coach Trista through her part. To make matters worse, Raina was having a tough time being an understudy. Not only was Samantha working on the set design, but she was also helping Raina rehearse in the evenings. "Why did I try out for Audrey?" Raina moaned. "Now I'm thinking Trista better not get sick or I'll make a fool of myself." "It'll be fine," Samantha said. "You've got the blocking down. Your lines are almost memorized. The only thing that's messed up is the singing." Raina threw up her hands. "Ugh, this is a nightmare. I'm going to get Trista back for being so mean." "Is that so?" "Yes, I am." She narrowed her eyes. "Wait until you see the outfit I've picked out for her. She'll totally love it." Sure enough, just before dress rehearsals the following week, Raina presented Trista with her wardrobe selection. "I can't wear that outfit," Trista complained. "It looks so used and wide and frumpy." "The show has practically no budget," Raina explained. "I had to make do with whatever we already had in the theater department. They're your size, and they'd be perfect for Audrey's part." "My size?" Trista clutched the potato sack of a dress. "These stripes will make me look huge. I'll do my own wardrobe, thank you very much." She tossed the dress at Raina. Mrs. Huff stopped her work with Eric, the boy who was playing Seymour. "Trista, wear what Raina chose. I'll have no prima donnas on my set. You're not in Hollywood yet." "But Mrs. Huff," Trista protested, "I can't wear used clothing. I could have a severe allergic reaction." Mrs. Huff let out a slow breath. "Get a doctor's note." Trista smiled. "I will." And the next day, she did. She also came back with a new outfit to wear. Samantha had to admit the leopard print dress and fur stole looked great for the part. Mom had it custom made. She held up a pair of insanely tall matching pumps. "They're designer, made out of real leopard. Can you believe it?" Everyone gawked. Raina stuck her finger down her throat. By week's end, the club was ready for dress rehearsal. After listening to Trista warble the music for weeks, Samantha couldn't wait for the show to be done. The pressure of Mr. Mason coming to town was also making everyone nervous. Mrs. Huff didn't want anyone to mess up. Eric was nervous. The chorus was nervous. Even the kids controlling the man-eating plant were making the plants shake too much. As Samantha worked on the finishing touches for a set piece, Mrs. Huff stepped off the stage while Trista and Eric practiced a duet. She rubbed her temples like she was having a migraine. Samantha, she said, lowering her voice, why couldn't you have tried out? Had Mrs. Huff completely forgotten that Samantha had single-handedly destroyed an entire musical? Trista is much better than I would be, Samantha stammered. Mrs. Huff glanced back at Trista, who was trying to dance and sha-la-la at the same time. Are you sure about that? Samantha swallowed. Uh-huh. Just then, Eric's voice cracked. Well, Mrs. Huff said, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. All of my students need to learn that, including those two. Samantha nodded. Do it again, Trista, Mrs. Huff called. It's supposed to be a shuffle step, not the polka. Samantha watched Mrs. Huff return to the stage. She was so glad she wasn't up there. The next evening, everyone geared up for the big performance. Raina was running around in the dressing room, helping Trista and her posse get ready. Samantha leaned against one of the lockers, wondering how long everyone was going to take. The show would be starting soon. I can't believe my zipper broke, one of Trista's friends whined. Even Trista was looking a bit off. Her eyes were tearing up, and she was clutching a tissue. Achoo! Raina's eyes bulged as she tried to fix the zipper. Trista, you don't have a cold, do you? Hardly, Trista said with a stuffy nose. I'm allergic to my clothes. Samantha and Raina stared at her. What? Trista gestured to her dress and raised her leg, pointing her shoe in the air. Allergic to leopard. Can you believe it? The doctor just figured it out yesterday. I told you I was allergic to stuff. She rubbed her eyes and blinked a few times. But the show must go on. She stood up. I'll be fine. Raina looked frazzled. Samantha, she better be fine. I'll die if I have to take her place. 5 minutes before showtime, Samantha and Raina peeked at the audience from the wings. The school musical was one of the town's biggest events. Every seat in the house was taken. With that many people there, Samantha wondered if she should have auditioned. She longed to sing to a packed house. Her heart felt a tug of regret. Raina seemed to know what Samantha was thinking. One day you'll sing. The lights dimmed and the music started. Eric moved onto the stage to act out his first scene as Seymour. Then Trista showed up next to Raina and Samantha. She wiped her nose. How do I look? Raina and Samantha stared at her. Trista looked awful. Her stage makeup was completely destroyed. Mascara ran down her cheeks, and her nose was as red as Rudolph's. Achoo! Shh! You should probably change, Raina whispered. I'll give you the clothes off my back so you can get out there. No need, Trista said, waving her hand as if to shoo Raina away. Mr. Mason has to see a star on the stage, and I can't be wearing your rags. My outfit is what Audrey would wear, and that's who I am tonight. For Mr. Mason. She waited for her cue, and then she tottered out to the stage in her heels. Oh, could she be more obnoxious? Raina said. Achoo! Samantha shook her head. I can't look. It made her sick to see Trista ruin a great show. She retreated backstage and waited for the first act to play out so she could help with the next scene change. Everyone managed to make it to intermission without much incident. But when Samantha saw Trista in the wings, she doubted the girl was going to last through the whole play. Her eyes were bloodshot. She had gone through half a box of Kleenex. Everyone wondered if she needed a medic. I'm an actress, Trista said vehemently. Achoo! I won't give up after something like this. Trista, Mrs. Huff said, you clearly have a medical condition. Please, Mrs. Huff, I can do this, Trista insisted. I'm totally fine. I won't let Mr. Mason down. Achoo! Raina stepped in. Mrs. Huff, you gotta let her go on that stage. She crossed her fingers behind her back. This is her dream. Oh, all right, Mrs. Huff relented, and Trista went out again. Just a few more numbers, Raina whispered to Samantha, and I'm home free. They watched as the duet for the song, Suddenly Seymour, began. Trista's voice was growing hoarse, but she was still able to croak the lyrics. Samantha found herself admiring Trista for being so determined, even though she was making a hot mess of the show. Suddenly, Trista stopped singing. She pursed her lips and squeezed her eyes shut as if trying to hold something back. Uh-oh. What was she doing? Achoo! Trista sneezed so hard she stumbled in her heels. She fell off the stage. The crowd gasped. Samantha's heart skipped a beat as Trista crashed into the orchestra pit. Was she hurt? Samantha and Raina rushed down to the stage steps toward her. I'm fine, Trista shouted immediately. She sprang up from the pit. Her dress was torn and her hair was sticking up everywhere. I'm fine. She plucked a violin bow out of her hair. See? The crowd let out a collective sigh of relief as the lights came on. The audience showered Trista with applause, glad she was safe. Mrs. Huff hurried to help Trista. I can still do it, Mrs. Huff, Trista pleaded. Please, I can finish the show. I haven't broken a leg or anything. Daddy, Mr. Mason, are you seeing this? I am still going on. I'm a true star. But Mrs. Huff wasn't having it. She led Trista out of the pit as fast as she could. As she passed Raina and Samantha, she said, Raina, it's showtime. Get up there. The lights dimmed and the crowd settled down. No way, Raina hissed. I can't do this. You go. Samantha looked up at the stage. Seymour was just standing there alone, looking like he was desperate to get out of the musical himself. The crowd was silent. Samantha bit her lip. The open stage was beckoning to her, but her insides spun with nausea. She was scared. What had Mrs. Huff said? There was nothing to fear but fear itself. Samantha swallowed. Then, suddenly, she was tired of being afraid. Her hands clenched into fists. She couldn't give it any more power. That stage was meant to be hers. She moved toward the stage and climbed the steps. Someone noticed who she was. A boy shouted, We always loved you, Sam. Yay, it's Samantha, shouted a girl. Samantha stood a little taller. Maybe the audience had forgotten what had happened 2 years ago. Or maybe she was the only person who had not. More people cheered for her. She noticed a man in a fancy suit sitting front row center. Mr. Mason. Samantha stood beside Eric and took in a breath. Maybe this was her time now. She waited for the music to begin, and she sang. She belted out the tune like it was the first and last song she would ever sing. As the crowd rose and cheered her on, Samantha was that little girl again, singing into a hairbrush with the feather boa over her shoulder. She was finally at home on the stage, full of hope, full of dreams. She would never be afraid to go after her dreams again. Okay, friends, Code 7, cracking the code for an epic life. What word do you think is the code cracker for this chapter? What word are we seeking? What's the lesson the author wants us to learn from this chapter? Make sure to write your thoughts in the chat.